All right. Thank you, Russell. Hey, time change. I'm so glad I don't have to remember that anymore. My phone just does it automatically. That's so nice. We've been in a series called Adventures in Love, and the first part of this series we looked at God of love, thinking about how God is love, unconditional love through and through, and kind of tackled some of the concepts of God that people have that are unloving, like a violent, punishing God, that kind of thing. Then we kind of moved into loving one another. So these are the three great commands: love God, love your neighbor, and then love yourself, right? How many of you are better at loving your neighbor than loving yourself? It's interesting, isn't it? I actually think historically Christians sometimes have the biggest problems loving themselves. Many times they've grown up in real guilt-oriented environment, or you're always getting guilted to do everything and kind of running yourself down, but then you try to love God and love everybody else, but you run yourself down. And so we're going to be taking a little bit of a turn here between now and Easter weekend. I'll be starting a new series, but these next couple of Sundays I want to talk about self-compassion. Take a little bit. This relates to loving others, so this message today kind of involves both loving others well, but also doing that in a way where we have healthy boundaries and really love ourselves well, and that's important. The passage that I want to look at today is from the Hebrew Bible, Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. Okay, Proverbs 4, verse 23. It's a very short proverb, and it says, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Guard your heart above all else, and another translation says, because from it flow the springs of life. Your heart is a wellspring, and it can be a healthy wellspring, it can be an unhealthy wellspring, right? So I want to think a little bit about how to guard our heart. And what's interesting about this passage is that it's echoing backwards to Genesis 2:15. Genesis 2:15. You look at those first two chapters of Genesis, you have the creation story. And if you remember, Adam and Eve are placed in the Garden of Eden. And in Genesis 2:15, God speaks to Adam and Eve as he places them in the garden, and he calls Adam and Eve to tend and watch. That watch word is the same word that the proverb is using. Tend and watch the garden. So when this proverb comes out, tend, watch your heart, there's an echo there. It's kind of comparing your heart to a garden. How many of you have ever tried to garden or do gardening? Let me see your hands. Oh man, so many. My dad did gardens, but I never really picked it up too much. He grew vegetables and all that kind of stuff. But those of you who garden, do you have to guard and watch your garden? Do you have to tend to it? Why? What can happen to your garden if you don't tend to it, watch over it? I heard a deer will eat it up, right? Bunny rabbits will eat it up, right? Weeds will grow. It dies. Don't get enough water or tending or caring, yeah. What about bugs? What about fungus? There's a whole host of things that can invade your garden and make it unhealthy, right? On the flip side, if we watch it and tend to it and garden it well, it produces beauty and fruit and vegetables and all kinds of wonderful life-giving things, right? So I think it's a great analogy that the person that's writing the proverb is comparing the heart to a garden. In fact, in the Genesis 2:15 passage, those two words, the Hebrew words, are avodah, tend, or that's actually the word for work. Work the garden, tend the garden. And then shamar is the word for watch or guard the garden. So work it and watch it. And when those two words are combined, tend and watch, throughout the rest of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, every time it's what the priests are called to do. Isn't that interesting? So the garden is like a garden sanctuary, and us human beings are called to be good stewards of this creation that we live in. We're called to care for it and tend to it and guard it and watch it and cultivate it, co-create and move it forward in beauty and love. This is actually a priestly calling that every one of you has. You're all priests and priestesses in this beautiful sanctuary that God has placed us in. And we're to care and tend and watch the planet, creation, our relationships, and our own heart. So I love that image. And we're called to do this as a service to God. It's an act of worship to tend and care for our own heart, just as it is to tend and care for the hearts of others and the world that we live in, the creation that we live in. So I think it's a great analogy between our heart, thinking of it as a garden. And so what do we want to guard against? As a pastor I preached my first sermon at 16. I turned 65 this Tuesday. So it's the first time that I look forward to getting old, because I get on Medicare and I've put off a surgery for 2 years to save myself $10,000, okay? And so guess when my surgery is scheduled? I've put one off for, my birthday's Tuesday, my surgery's Wednesday, okay? So yeah, I jumped right on it. Because I like to ride my bike and stuff, So anyway, it's been an interesting couple of years. But as I think about tending the garden and pastoring people through these years since I was 16, and then trying to garden my own heart, right? It's a challenging balance, right? To take care of yourself, to have healthy self-care, self-compassion, and at the same time care for others and have healthy relationships with other people. It's a balance, and it can be a tricky balance at times. One of the things I've realized as pastor is that a lot of Christians, and maybe others as well, people, human beings in general, I've worked with Christians so much, but a lot of people have trouble with healthy boundaries. And they're sometimes people who are great at caring for others, and they'll wear themselves out caring for others, but then when it comes to caring for themselves, they don't do as good a job. A book came out in 1992 called Boundaries, and it was written by Henry Cloud, John Townsend, and it was kind of revolutionary because a lot of Christians historically have just guilted everybody to work themselves to death and not pay much attention to their own self-help. And when this book came out, it really changed the course of conversation in a lot of churches, helping people think through healthy boundaries, okay? One of the things that I've learned as a pastor counseling people through the years is that one of the things that people struggle with is the difference between trust and forgiveness. Trust and forgiveness. You might get into an unhealthy relationship at work or a coworker or something like that, maybe even a family member, and they do some things that hurt you, and as a Christian you're called to forgive, but sometimes we're also called to set a healthy boundary. And that it's a real challenging thing to know, especially if it's a close person or a family member or something like that. How do you love and serve and be a blessing to others, but then at the same time, if people hurt you or even take advantage of you or try to control you or even abuse you, then how do you love and forgive but then set a boundary? I've had so many times where people ask me, they were working through a forgiveness of an abusive relationship, and they think that to forgive somebody means that you have to let them back into your life with no stop. And so then you're just in this cycle of hurt and sometimes control and abuse. And so what I've tried to help people realize is that forgiveness is something that we do just for our own health. We really need to forgive to get rid of the bitterness and resentment because we don't want to live with that. We want to release it. We want to release it to God. We want to put the people in God's hands. So we forgive for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons we forgive is for our own mental health, our own health, that we don't live in bitterness, right? But trust is something different. Forgiveness is a gift. It's something we're called to do. But trust is earned, actually, right? You trust people who have good character. You trust people who are trustworthy. How do you know if somebody's trustworthy? Well, you hang out with them for a while. You do work, you do family, you do in all of that kind of stuff. So there are some people that you will encounter in your life, and it could be even family members, because you don't choose your parents, you don't choose your siblings, or you're in a job and you end up with a coworker. You don't always choose your coworkers, right? And so you can end up in relationships or situations where you're bumping into a person that's kind of hurtful, and they hurt you, and you're called to forgive them, but it doesn't mean that you are called to live in an ongoing relationship with them in a trusting way, because they're not trustworthy. Does that make sense? So you can forgive somebody and actually never let them back into your life again. Did you hear that? I literally got an email just 2 weeks ago. A gal was asking me, Fred, I've been meeting with my therapist, and I'm just wondering, my therapist said that I could forgive somebody but not let them back in my heart, because she'd been in an abusive relationship. And she says, is that right? Because she was still struggling with the Christian idea of forgiveness, and then that meant that she had to let the person back in their life. And I was like going, no, you don't have to let anybody in your life if they're not trustworthy, right? So the beautiful thing is that we do get to choose our friends. We do get to choose our partners. There are some relationships that we get to choose, we have agency over, but there are also some that we are in because we didn't choose it, right? And so balancing forgiveness with healthy boundaries, saying yes, saying no, is a real important part. I learned a huge lesson early on in my ministry. I may have shared this story. It's worth sharing again if I did. But, I'd gone through college and seminary. So 4 years of college, got a Bachelor of Arts in Religion and Business. And then I went to seminary, got a Master of Divinity at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. Went to a first church full-time pastor. I was associate pastor at a church in Hampton, Virginia. Okay? So I'm fresh out of seminary. I've got my first full-time pastor job. And I'm also working with the youth at the church. And I do my first youth meeting. And one of the female students in the youth group asked to meet with me. She was 17, I think. She was a really beautiful young woman. And I met with her in the office. And she sat down. I didn't know her. And she proceeded to tell me that her dad had been physically, emotionally, sexually abusing her since the time she could remember. And I didn't even know her, right? And I was the new pastor on staff, and I meet with her, and she shares with me this story. Well, here's the kicker. Her dad was the chairman of the deacons and taught the largest Sunday school class in the church. And we didn't take a class on this in seminary, by the way, okay? So I honestly, I wasn't sure quite what to do. If you listened to my message last week, we talked about conflict resolution. And so I actually just kind of picked up with some of those ideas on conflict resolution. So I actually went to the pastor who was the senior pastor that I was serving with, and told him, and he really didn't have training in this either. And so we both kind of did the Bible thing where you don't triangulate. Remember, I talked about that. We called the guy in, me, the pastor, now confront her dad. Well, I told him what his daughter said, and he started crying and admitted to everything. He walked out of the meeting, and we were going to have to, report this, right? There's all kinds of legal issues that are going on here. But here's what I didn't realize, and nobody had taught me this, and I learned it, and I still grieve what I did to this family to this day. Because he was a controlling, abusive, narcissistic personality. And even though he confessed it before the two of us, when he walked out, he realized he was probably going to go to prison. And guess what he did when he went back home? He shut down the whole family. They never came back to church again. He denied anything and made up rumors about us as they left the church. He never went back to the church again. So I realized that he probably went back home and abused his family worse, right? So what we actually did was actually unsafe for the girl. Do you see, you can see why it kind of breaks my heart just talking about it again. A few years later, when I came here to start a church, we partnered with Synergy in Parkville. And we started developing domestic violence kinds of ministries. Because the number one call for police officers in any city across America is domestic violence. That's the number one response thing that police officers respond to. It goes on way more than we realize it, right? And many times there's a woman or a teenager trapped in an abusive relationship, and if you confront it head on, it gets worse, violent, or even death, right? I mean, this is crazy stuff. So this is why you have hotlines, why you have, shelters for women and all this kind of stuff. And we ended up just really developing ministries for women or teens who were in these kinds of things at my previous church. And Synergy was a good partner here in Parkville as well. I want to mention all of that because healthy boundaries are really, really important. And on one extreme, you've got the narcissistic personalities, right, who have no empathy and only think about themselves. On the other end of the spectrum, you can have what some people call egoist. Have you heard that term? Or codependency, where you don't have hardly any self-awareness or care for yourself, and you just give yourself constantly, and that kind of personality can become easy prey for a controlling personality, right? So this happens many times where controllers link up with codependent personalities and these kind of things. So tending the garden of your heart is so important because we can give and give and give to the neglect of our own personal health. Your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. Your mind and your heart is a garden that's a gift from God. And we need to learn to protect it, guard it, cultivate it. We need to guard ourselves from harmful relationships. And we need to replenish our heart with the good stuff. What do you do with a garden to make it healthy? Help me out, gardeners. Water it, feed it. What do you feed it? Say it again. Compost, manure, vitamins. There we go. How many of you talk to your plants? Yeah. You talk to them. I just released a blog on what we can learn from trees. Do you know trees communicate with each other? They release gases through the leaves. If there's an invasion of beetles or dry and all this kind of stuff, they communicate through the leaves to the whole forest. And then all the root systems in forests are connected through fungi, and they communicate through the root tips and fungi. There's a fungi in Oregon that's the largest living organism in the world. It's something like 2,400 years old and covers miles and miles and miles of acreage. It's the largest living organism in the world that we're aware of. And so communication goes on all the time, right? So we want to have healthy, loving communication. So how do you replenish your heart? All of us are going to have times when we get depleted. All of us have times when we get burned out. How do we replenish our hearts? How do we replenish our hearts? How many of you love nature? Amen. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. There's studies about like being on screens, video games, and social media. And I realize that you might feel like that's your love life, your love language, being stuck on your phone. But the studies show that when you're passively taking in stuff like media, too much of it actually turns toward an unhealthy thing. You can actually feel more depressed depending on the length of time that you spend on social media, okay, or media consumption. So I'm always challenging people to get back to nature. I love nature, obviously, but again, show me again. How many of you love nature? That's most of the room. That's awesome. Tell me things you love to do in nature. Camping, all right, camping, fishing, hunting, hiking, biking.
Pay attention to the sounds and the smells.
Oh, yeah. Meditate, pray, watch the sunrise. Bird watching. I love bird watching. I keep a bird book on my desk. I've been bird watching all over America. And I even got into it so big one time where I started learning all the bird calls. I'd listen to albums of bird calls. And then I did that in Texas. And I got to where I could identify almost every bird in Texas. I can definitely identify all the birds that come through here. So I love bird watching. It's just amazing to me, the creativity. I love to watch nature videos. Octopuses are some of the most crazy, unique creatures on the planet. There's a Netflix video on an octopus, and check that out. It's incredible. They're one of the most intelligent beings on the planet, all right? How about art and music? Okay. Serving can be a replenishing activity, but you have to watch your heart, right? I know some people who are serving who are grumpy about it and feel guilty about it and kind of resentful about it. Don't do that kind of service. We all need outflow because it makes us healthy, right? And so when we receive, we want to give. And that's true of your time, that's true of your talents, your gifts, that's true of your money, your treasure. You want to be a flow. But you want to guard your heart, because if you get into a service situation where you're not feeling replenished from it, and by the way, I'm called to a life of service. And, I can feel, I can get served out sometimes, right, as a pastor. So there's an ebb and flow to this stuff. But in general, I love to give and I love to serve, and I live to give and I live to serve. I mean, that's really how I do things. But I have to learn to also replenish my own heart. And that's a big, huge priority. If you don't replenish your own heart, then you won't be good for other people. So that's an important thing to remember as well. So think about even the people you hang out with. You can choose your friends. Some people might be VDPs, very draining people. Some people might be VIPs, very important, and they help replenish you. So I'm always trying to be mindful of relationships that like actually buoy me and replenish me. And then relationships, it doesn't mean I minister to people anyway, but sometimes you can get drained. I'm an introvert, which means that I get replenished by having some alone time. So even when I do this kind of activity, I get a little emotionally depleted, not because I don't like it and I'm called to it, right? But because I'm an introvert, it depletes me. And then I have to spend some time alone to get replenished, and good time alone, meditation, these kinds of things that we're talking about. Community is a huge one. We need community. Easter Sunday, we're going to have two services, 9 and 10:30, 9 a.m. and 10:30. Mark that down. If you show up at 10, you'll be early and finishing up the one service, right? I'm going to start a new series. We're going to call it Communities for Human Flourishing, but it's going to be a study on Ephesians. And there's a great little commentary that just came out by Tom Wright, N.T. Wright, on Ephesians. And it really brings out the central theme that the Apostle Paul is trying to bring out, is building communities that help in human flourishing. And so we need actually communities like church and recovery and all kinds of communities that we can connect with and do life together with other people and love each other, support each other, and we give and take with each other. They're there for us, I'm there for them, we're there for them. And so we're going to we'll be working through the book of Ephesians for about 9 weeks and looking at communities of human flourishing. So my challenge for you today is the proverb: guard your heart above all else. Why? Because from it flows the springs of life. Let's pray. God, come do a work in our hearts today. Ask for your Spirit to guide and direct us through this. Maybe some are here and maybe you're in a relationship where you need to kind of rethink it, maybe set some healthy boundaries. Maybe you've got a friend or a loved one that's in a toxic relationship and you want to help kind of guide them through that. Lord, give us wisdom to have self-compassion and self-care and learn to help us set healthy boundaries. At the same time, God, help us to build activities daily, weekly, monthly that help breathe life into our heart. Help us to tend the garden of our heart well. And may we guard and tend and protect, because this is our holy sanctuary that is a mobile sanctuary that we get to experience this planet through this body and be a blessing to others and receive blessing ourselves. And so may we tend and care and watch the garden of our heart really well. Heal us where we need to be healed. Help us to help set healthy boundaries where we need to do that. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.